Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Schwartz. Maybe you can give me a quick thumbs up so that you can hear me. Yay, thank you. Janine, so I see you. Laura, thank you. Andrew, great, good, good. Rebecca is just putting really finishing touches on some information in her presentation. And while actually, I'm gonna stream this to Facebook, but before I do that, I'd love to know where people are from, what year your student is in high school. I assume a lot of people on here tonight have a high school junior, how many kids you have, what your concerns are. We're interested to hear it all. We're gonna try and share information, not try, we will share information tonight about early admissions. What just kind of happened this past fall/beginning of winter season, and give you some suggestions about what that information means for your students, since you're kind of getting into the depth of the college admissions process if you have a junior. And if you have a sophomore, then that's great that you're kind of learning earlier, and you can really kind of take your time a little bit in absorbing the information. So yeah, good range. Someone from it looks like some sophomores, juniors, from all over the place, which it's so interesting to see. Texas, Arizona, Florida, New Jersey, Connecticut, Philadelphia. So that's great. Just as an FYI, just for fun, Rebecca and I are actually in the Philadelphia area. Just kind of coincidence, but that's just where our location is. But it's nice to see people from all different parts of the country. So Rebecca, you almost ready?
Yeah, I just kept your format, but yes.
Okay, let me stream this.
And you gave me access to share screen, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me make sure all my other things are closed, so no other work stuff pops up. I'm here with you. Okay.
Okay, wait 1 sec. And wait 1 second. Okay, that should be going. So let me just tell everybody just a few kind of ground rules of tonight, not a big deal, but this is a meeting. I like I think it's just kind of fun if you want to put your video on. It's nice to see people's faces if you want to see other people's faces who are here tonight. Personally, it's fun for us as presenters because we can kind of see your reaction. We can see, if something made sense, if people had questions about something, we get to see a little bit on your faces. I'm perfectly fine if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question. It makes us feel a little closer in this virtual world. But if not, you obviously are free to put your questions into chat. I'm gonna monitor the chat, and if it's appropriate, I'll try and interrupt Rebecca and we'll ask the question, or if not, we'll probably get to a lot of questions at the end. But you don't have to hold your questions. You can put it in chat as you hear them, because it's hard to remember what you wanted to ask if we go through a lot of information. So as I mentioned, tonight we're talking about this just recently early admission season of the, I guess I always get the numbers not mixed up, but I always have to think twice before I say the numbers. It's really of the, what do we call it? It's for the students who are going to start school in the academic year 2022, 2023, right?
Class of 2026.
Class of 2026, that's another way of saying it, right?
Yeah.
Do they refer to it as the admission season of 2021, 2022? It's like
Yeah, there's so many different ways to refer to it.
I know,
Yeah,
I know.
so it's the 2021-2022 admission season for the class of 2022, high school class of 2022, college class of
We could
2022.
drive ourselves crazy with all the numbers.
Yes.
But we don't have all the information just because all the information isn't out. But Rebecca is very good at scrounging whatever is out there and pulling together and trying to make sense of it. That's really what we're trying to do tonight, is share with you these, what the numbers are and kind of an interpretation of how you should use the information. And as I said, I'm Debbie Schwartz. I founded Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. I'm here tonight with Rebecca Chabro, and Rebecca is the head of college counseling at a private school in Pennsylvania called Linden Hall. And maybe Rebecca, you give like a few minutes of your backgrounds.
Yeah, so like Debbie said, I'm the director of college counseling at Linden Hall, which is the oldest all-girls boarding school in the entire country. We have about a 50% international population too, which is pretty fun, but students from all over the country and all over the world. I have worked really in almost every type of high school setting. I started my career in a public school in northern New Jersey, in Bergen County, working with like very working class population, a lot of first generation American students and first generation college students. Then I went and worked in Barcelona at the Benjamin Franklin International School. So that was an IB school. So my students almost entirely followed the IB curriculum. And I had students mostly applying to the UK, although some also to the US and the Netherlands and some other places like that. And we actually have given presentations on international admissions as well. Fun fact, it's a lot more affordable than the US. So I know a lot of you are here because of your concern for cost of college. And so if, let's say you're an East Coast student willing to consider California, well, maybe consider the UK as well. And you can get a world-class education, or the Netherlands for similar distance and definitely less expensive. So then after that, I moved back to the US, worked for an independent college counseling company for a few months, realized I wanted to be back in a school. But while I was there, it was a very high-end college counseling company. They charge like $750 an hour, something that I don't recommend you spending. We can give you a lot of that information here. And they really taught me the best practices in college counseling. And I've used what I've learned there to I've implemented that into my practice working in schools. So then I worked at a Jewish boarding school in North Carolina for 2 years until unfortunately it closed, but that was also an international school. So I have experience working there as well. And then when the school closed, did a year working in graduate admissions, where I did interview students for doctoral programs. I was the director of admissions at Gratz College, just outside Philly. And then was lucky, I really missed being in a high school. So I ended up getting this job at Linden Hall as the director of college counseling. So as you can tell, a lot of different experiences, but really a lot of different schools. So pretty much any student I encounter through Road to College, I've worked at a school pretty much very similar to what they have encountered. And I apologize. What was that?
Oh, no, I think somebody unmuted themselves by accident, but go ahead.
I'm going to, I really hope my throat doesn't get too dry this whole time. This is my third workshop today. So I am a full-time college counselor.
So one other thing, so Rebecca has been for the past year, we have a service called Concierge Service, and she's our counselor in residence, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But one of the things why Rebecca and I think enjoy working together is we both honestly love data, and we want to use data as much as possible to help guide in this crazy process. It can't be, it's not the definitive answer always, but there's actually a lot more data than people realize that you can at least make better decisions based on, instead of kind of pure opinion, which there's a lot of in this space.
Yeah, so as I said, I apologize if I need to keep sipping on tea. Third workshop today, plus a bunch of meetings. So it's been a little busy. All right, so I'm going to share my screen.
Go ahead.
And we'll get started. Okay. All right, so this is just a little taste of our concierge service based off of really the workshop that we gave in December for our seniors, kind of the last workshop that we gave for those senior parents. And we are going to show you some of that workshop and you'll get a kind of an idea of what we do. Okay, so first I want to just talk about COVID's lasting impacts on college admissions, because COVID changed a lot of things within college admissions. Most notably was test optional. So test optional is when colleges do not require standardized tests for review of the application. So the standardized tests being the SAT and the AC or the ACT. And we do a whole workshop on standardized tests so you can learn more about the differences and more about test optional practices there. But so test optional had been a trend that was really popular with small liberal arts colleges, but and had been picking up steam. So a lot of the highly selective liberal arts colleges were already test optional. And then colleges a few years ago, I remember in 2018, University of Chicago went test optional. That was really big. My students suddenly thought like, okay, they could get in now that they didn't have test scores. It's still very highly selective, but they went test optional. And there's a myriad of reasons that colleges go test optional, which we will talk about more in future workshops. But COVID really amped up test optional practices pretty much across the board because there were fewer test sites available due to COVID. And there was at the test sites, there were having administrations, there was social distancing, so there had to be further space in between desks. So therefore, there was a lot fewer opportunities to take the test.
So Rebecca, could I just mention one thing? Because somebody's commenting, Andrew said, University of Chicago didn't go test optional for international students. I don't know if would most of the schools that did go test optional, did they make a separate policy for test optional for US students versus international?
Most are, it's occasionally it's different. I want to say, I feel like I might be wrong, but I thought Chicago was test optional for international students because I had a number of international students apply test optional. So unless things have changed again, I know that it was a lot of my international students that were excited about this test optional change. But that was in, I believe, 2018. So, but yeah, I mean, most schools are going to be test optional for all students. There are the occasional schools that are test optional just for American students, and I have had that. But overall, because there were fewer opportunities, there were a lot more colleges that were test optional. It was a huge increase. Almost every college that's nationally known went test optional, except for the University of Florida schools, pretty much. And then even Georgetown, which is notorious for loving their standardized tests, still said, okay, test optional, but if you really recommended that you still submit standardized tests. But it was a big movement. And so that was something that was big. And that led to more applications, right? So there was a record number of applications at the top colleges and really across the board at a lot of other colleges as well. Applications did go up. Test optional practices really opened up those hypothetical gates. So like I told you, my students, were really excited that Chicago went test optional. They suddenly thought, okay, I don't need a certain test score to be able to get in. In reality, the acceptance rate stayed the same, if not went down, because there were more applicants, but it still opens up the opportunities for more people. So one of the things that test optional has done is it's allowed more access for underrepresented populations. So when we say this word, when we say underrepresented minorities, I'm going to be referring to Black students, Black or African American students, Latinx, Hispanic students, Native American students. And then also within underrepresented populations are first generation college students, which means that neither of your parents have received a four-year college degree, or if you're a low income student. So those are the underrepresented populations within colleges. And so because those students tend to not do as well on standardized tests, they weren't applying before, now they're applying and getting into these colleges. So it's definitely opened up those gates for those students. But for a lot of other students, it has given a false sense of admissibility, because ultimately there is while there are some top students academically who are not good test takers, there is still a high correlation between top students and good test takers. And so then that kind of resulted in this cyclical uncertainty, right? So test optional opens the gates to more applicants leads to lower application rates, because they still, other than Rice, which actually did increase the size of their freshman class, colleges are still the same size that they were, but they have more applicants, so lower acceptance rates. Lower acceptance rates leads to uncertainty of outcomes, and the uncertainty of outcomes leads to more applications, which is why you'll see this year, even though things have become more normal, there's still an increase in applications.
So Rebecca, a quick question. Somebody is asking, are gay students, trans students, are they considered underrepresented groups?
So they're not considered underrepresented populations per se. And I think there's a significant amount of gay students that it's not quite seen as something that they're looking for diversity maybe anymore. I don't ever really hear that. It's definitely part of what, colleges are looking for diversity in lots of senses. And I encourage gay students, there's the College Pride Index is a really great website to look at to understand what colleges have great resources for gay students. But I'd say, so there's no statistics out there about like gay student acceptance rates or, tips for gay students or trans students, but it certainly adds to the overall diversity. And, one thing you'll hear a lot through a lot of our workshops is there's diversity in many other ways other than these socioeconomic and racial ways. So yes, those can add diversity, but if they're simply just what they are, that's not going to help. It's going to be, how well they convey their story, whether it's coming out or transitioning, or, challenges they've had to overcome, because of that, or maybe their involvement within gay straight alliances within their school or advocacy that they've done. So lots of different ways that can be portrayed in the application to show that diversity. But it's not quite the same. It's not considered an underrepresented population.
Okay, and last question before you continue, Rebecca. People are pointing to, and I actually saw the article, but I have to admit I didn't get a chance to read it. There was an article that the title was basically colleges lost 465,000 students this fall, and there was a decline in enrollment last year that was noted due to COVID. And so I don't know if you have thoughts and opinions, kind of this decline in the college going population, and kind of how does that sync up with some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, where there was increased numbers of applications.
I have to say I haven't read that article either, so I don't have too much to comment on that, but that is something I definitely would like to read and look into more so. I think that, one thing that was a trend was students taking a gap year because college wasn't normal last year. I saw a lot more students taking gap years last year than I did this year. But that being said, gap years became more normalized. So that could be something as part of the reason, but a lot of those students who took gap years are now, going to college, but at the same time, they may have taken gap years and they might want to extend even more with their gap years. So
again, I
don't have specific knowledge or facts to that, so I can't really.
Yeah, I didn't read the article. I just
can't comment anymore. Yeah,
I just remember from reading other, stats from like previous year. The 465,000 is not targeted only to high school students applying to college. That's across all the years, freshman through senior of college, of students dropping out. So that's one thing. And then, as somebody else is kind of noting, it would be interesting to see, but my guess is that 465,000, even the percentage or the population group of those people, of students who were high school seniors, that maybe chose not to go to college immediately, it probably is not equally distributed across the colleges that we're going to talk about tonight. That's just the reality. It's probably, different sets of colleges than the top 100, or colleges or so.
Yeah. And that's something important just to say in general, is that, everything that we say here and a lot of what we recommend here is really for like the top 250 colleges in the United States. Outside those top 250 colleges or so, maybe 300, it's almost open enrollment. It's not quite, but like acceptance rates are very high. I had a student with 3.4 GPA this week email me that she was really stressed out about, applications. She's a junior, we're just getting started, and she was really stressed out. But she wants to stay in state, and she doesn't have high expectations of going to a highly selective school. And so I wrote her back and I said, of approximately 84 colleges that I at least have records of I have data on in Pennsylvania, approximately of those 84, she should have no problem getting into 70 of them. So that's 70 out of 84 colleges in the state of Pennsylvania that 3.4, so that's a B+ student, should have absolutely no problem getting into. So most of the colleges out there, you should absolutely be able to get into and get some pretty, maybe get some good merit scholarships, which is one of the things that we talk about a lot here. But it's those, let's say top 250, 300 colleges in the country that are more selective, especially those top 50 that are insanely selective. And this is, those top 200, 250 universities or so are the ones that a lot of students apply to. And that's where all the applications, for the most part, are going to, not all over the country, but for people looking nationally. So that's where we can be helpful. All right. So another thing just to be aware of with all these applications is the idea of yield protection. So colleges, there's a concept of yield, which is the percentage of students that are accepted that decide to go to a college. So colleges want to be able to accurately predict their freshman class. They know that not everybody they accept are going to go, but they want a significant number to attend. And so some of those second tier colleges might end up denying, deferring, or waitlisting seemingly top applicants that are likely to attend a top tier college instead. So one way to kind of counter that, because there's just so many applications that, especially with the common application where you can so easily apply to many colleges, a lot of colleges, are looking to those students maybe who demonstrate interest, and that can help counter this yield protection, that you're not just applying just to add another school, that you actually are interested. And we do a workshop on that as well.
Yeah, and Rebecca, just one college in particular, we were had a session the other day, a concierge session, and the families were saying that Case Western, I don't know if you were aware, and I wasn't, we pulled up the data, but Case Western did exactly that this past early admission season. They deferred, they didn't deny, they deferred extremely high stat students who were clearly like above the,
Interesting.
and gave, kind of that their sweet spot students, they accepted them with excellent merit scholarships, but it was all about the yield because they were afraid.
That
it's black and white.
I was just saying that's interesting because my school, I guess, they must really like my school because last year we got a lot of students in, and this year we did as well. So my only student that got deferred there didn't properly submit her financial aid forms. So other than that, all but one of my students got accepted. So, but that's where sometimes one thing you'll learn is that sometimes high schools have certain reputations with colleges. And so, our school's been around for a long time. We're in a neighboring state. So we tend to send a lot of applications there, and they must have had, we had one student enroll there this year. So they've had success. So that is something to be aware of. Where do students successfully apply from your school with similar academic profiles? So that's something to be aware of, but that's interesting about Case. And then just going along with test optional, holistic admissions. It's not a new concept by any means. It's probably one of the most common words you'll hear from college admissions officers. Holistic admissions means that they're looking at factors that they're looking at your academic profile, but they're also looking at factors beyond that. So a lot of those qualitative factors, such as your essay, your letters of recommendation, your extracurricular activities, your interview, who you are as a person, they're looking at the whole person. So not just your grades, your test scores, and the classes that you're taking. So that's just been even more emphasized now that you're taking away one of those academic factors. Okay, so now looking at this year's statistics. So last year we had record-breaking application numbers. It went through the roof. And and in part that was because of test optional. So 95% of, this is all data from the Common Application, which is the most common application platform. They have, is it like over 2,000 schools? They have like over 900 schools or something.
Yeah.
Pretty much almost every college on the national radar, other than some of like the big public systems and like Georgetown, are on the Common Application. So with that, 95% of their member schools are test optional. So that's a lot. That's, you know, a lot of colleges, which is up from 90% in 2020, 2021. So I actually had thought that, you know, I was anticipating that the test optional schools there would be less test optional schools this year, but there's actually even more. So that trend is continuing. And 53% of early applicants, so these are applicants that had submitted applications as of November 16th. So they, 53% submitted standardized test scores. So that's actually a 4% increase from last year. So with, you know, test centers reopening, people have been taking more, you know, standardized tests. There's just more access to them. So there is that increase, but there's still, you know, a significant number of people who are not taking, who are not submitting, you know, that's 47% of students are still not submitting their standardized test scores. And it's still a 27% decrease since before COVID. So before COVID, 80% of students were submitting standardized test scores. Now it's only 53%. So, and I explained why this is the case. And so you can see these graphs here just break it down by, so it's across all populations, but here you'll see this is underrepresented minorities. So it's an even more drastic drop, and then a little bit of an increase, but not quite up to where it was than non-underrepresented minorities. First generation, you know, there's fewer first generation students submitting test scores, and then low income, so students who receive fee waivers. So those, you know, those populations tend to be ones that are taking advantage of this test optional policy, and it really has been helping them. So that's good. And so when you look at the number of applicants, so this year there were 780,024 applicants submitted to 853 returning member schools. So yeah, there's additional schools that have added to the Common App this year, but these are the ones that were in it last year, and so they can do that comparison. And so that's 13% more than before the pandemic. So that's, you know, a significant increase, and you can see the increase in applications from before the pandemic and then after the pandemic. And so then so a total of, so this was the applicants, not applications. And then over 3 million applications were submitted. So 22% more than pre-pandemic. So still, you know, numbers are going up, and it's 17% more than last year's early cycle. So just some things to keep in mind. I think there was a ton of uncertainty last year. So what we're seeing this year is there's a lot more students applying early. Doesn't necessarily mean they're applying early decision, but they're submitting their applications early. International students, there's a 40% increase in the number of international students applying over 2019, which I find interesting because there's definitely there was kind of a drop in international applicants last year. But this year, especially from China, there's some new legislation in China that's causing Chinese students to actually apply, more of them to apply to the US. So you're seeing more international applications as well. And then overall, there was a 28% increase in public school applications and a 15% increase in private school applications over pre-COVID numbers. So, you know, because of COVID and test optional really has increased the applications, but then also increased the uncertainty, which thus increases more applications. So it's interesting to see how all of this has kind of helped the cause of equity. So, you know, basically helping level the playing field in terms of, helping underrepresented populations go to college. So with first generation students, there was a 20% increase in the number of first generation early applicants over the pre-COVID numbers, compared to 11% for non-first generation. So that's, double the increase, which is great. Definitely that helps, tighten the gap between the first generation students and the students whose parents went to college. There's a 27% of early applicants this year were first generation. So that's really huge, that students whose a lot of these students, their parents don't know the system, and so don't know that it could be advantageous to apply early. And now, they are applying early and gaining some of those advantages themselves. So that's really great that a quarter of all applicants are first generation. Underrepresented minorities, 16% increase in underrepresented minorities since before COVID, and that's compared to 13% for underrepresented minorities. So that's also, good for equity. And socioeconomically, though, there's an 8% increase in the number of fee waiver applicants over 2019, 2020. So that's good. There's more low income students applying, but it's not quite as much as the non-low income students. So those non-fee waiver students had a higher increase in applications. And something to keep in mind, so really socioeconomically, there's still work to do in terms of equity. 60% of domestic applicants come from the top 20 affluent zip codes. And so that's something that, is really striking, I think, that still the most wealthy are submitting the most applications. And only 5% of domestic applicants come from the bottom 20 affluent zip codes. So we're coming some ways, we're coming along with the first generation underrepresented minorities. Socioeconomic factors still do play a role in whether people are choosing to apply to go to college or not. So before we go really talk about the early decision results and early action results from this past cycle, I'm just going to do a quick overview of what the types of applications are, since all of you are new to us at least and don't quite know, may not know what they mean. So there's different types of application cycles, and sometimes they're viewed differently in admissions offices. So regular decision is the final deadline for admissions. So typically it's between January 1st and January 15th. So they're wrapping up the deadlines now, but most of them around January 1st. Some of the large public flagships, they have flagship universities, which is like the main university in their state, will have earlier regular decision deadlines. So for example, University of Florida is November 1st, University of Washington's November 15th, the University of California and Cal State University are November 30th, Rutgers, South Carolina, Texas A&M, they're December 1st, and Tennessee's December 15th. There's a few that are later, like February 1st. Occasionally there's a March 1st, but for the most part, it's January. And it's because these regular decision deadlines, they really try to have all of their decisions out by the end of March. And those larger schools sometimes need more time because they're just getting a lot more applicants. You can see all of these are huge schools with lots of applicants. Rolling is where there's no set deadline. So those are called rolling admission. Typically it's for less selective colleges, although there are some colleges that are more selective, like the University of Pittsburgh, which they're rolling, but it's first come, first serve for those programs. So especially for their more selective programs, it's more advantageous to apply early. And I've had students get accepted to schools like Pittsburgh or Auburn. I've heard people get decisions in September. So you can get decisions really early from a lot of these schools that have rolling applications. Typically, they say 4 to 8 weeks and you'll get your decision. Then there's early decision, which is most of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Early decision is a binding application plan. So if you're accepted, you are committing to attend. You actually sign a contract. The student, the parent, and the counselor all sign a contract that is sent to the school saying that, if they are accepted, they will attend. So you want to make sure that that's financially a wise decision for you before you do that. Although a lot of the schools that have, not all, but a number of the schools that have early decision will meet your financial need and give you good financial aid. But you always want to make sure, and this is something once again, we cover in a lot of our workshops. And so if you're deferred from the school, meaning you don't get in the early decision round, but they basically put your application into the regular decision round, they defer your application, then you are no longer bound to that school if accepted. So you are released from that early decision agreement. Obviously, if you're denied, then you're going to be released from that agreement as well. Students can only apply to one early decision school because obviously if you get into one, you have to go there. So you can't apply to more than one. The deadline's typically November 1st to 15th, and decisions are released typically right before winter break, but definitely right before January 1st. There's a higher acceptance rate generally than regular decision because obviously if you're committing to attend, that's going to help them with their yield prediction. So that's really good for them. But there's a lot of colleges where you'll see a significant difference in early decision acceptance rates to regular decision acceptance rates. And something to keep in mind, especially at those smaller schools, is that those early decision acceptance rates may be so high because all of the recruited athletes come in during that time. So those numbers are definitely inflated over what the reality would be if you're not a recruited athlete. And then there are early decision 2 options available at many colleges with January 1st or 15th deadlines. And so that is another option. If you don't have a first choice or a school you really want to go to in time for November 1st, you can also, or you don't get into your early decision school, you can apply early decision 2 as well. Do we want to take the question, Debbie? I see there's a hand raised or.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Betsy.
Betsy? No, didn't mean to raise your hand. Okay, well, type it in the chat if you have a question. Okay, early action is another type of application. We are going to talk a little bit about that tonight. That's, you apply early, typically in November, you know, find your decision out typically in December or January, and it's not binding. So you are not bound by the same contract that you are with early decision. And then there's a few schools that have something called single choice or restrictive early action. That's at Harvard, Notre Dame, Stanford, and Yale. And those are schools that you apply early action to that school. For some of those schools like Harvard, Yale, Notre Dame, there's like a little bit of benefit to doing so because you're showing that that's your top choice. But Stanford says it absolutely does not matter. They also don't report their acceptance rate information. So it's hard, at least their early one. So it's hard to kind of see exactly how beneficial it would be. But basically you apply, it's not binding, so it is early action, but it's restrictive in the sense that you're only allowed to apply, you cannot apply to any school regular decision, and you cannot apply to any other schools, private schools, early action. So for example, I had one of my top students, she applied, you know, she was deciding between Harvard, I want to say it was Harvard, Yale, and University of Chicago. And University of Chicago has early action, but it's not binding. And she wanted to apply to other schools, you know, she wanted to apply to a few other schools early action as well. She visited Chicago, realized that was her top choice, even though she could have gotten that advantage at Harvard or Yale potentially. She decided to apply to, you know, early action to Chicago because one, it didn't limit her from applying to her public schools early action, but also because she wouldn't be able to apply to early action to Chicago if she applied early action to Harvard or Yale. Okay. So when we look at the results, first let's look at the application trends. And so one thing you'll see where last year, the trends really were fairly consistent. There was only one school in which there was a higher acceptance rate than there typically was. And we're going to look at that in the next slide. Here kind of things were all over. There was not really consistency with early application numbers. So there was no consistent trend in increase or decrease in number of applications over last fall. So this is just last year. So there was minimal change for some colleges. So, you know, typically that was a drop in applications, but a small drop as you could, or well, not necessarily. So you could see there's mine, you know, this should be blue, I apologize. But, you know, so Columbia and Penn had 2% less applications for the early round. Dartmouth had 1% less. MIT had 1% less. Georgetown Tech had 2% more. Georgia had 3% more. So those, and Georgia Tech was only looking at in-state students for their early action one round, but they had a lot more applications. They had not a lot more, a little bit more. There was a little more
Rebecca, I don't know if you can,
significant change. So
Rebecca,
either
sorry,
less-
you're cutting
no,
out.
Harvard and Yale actually had less. Oh,
Rebecca, can you hear me? You were cutting in and out.
The
Can you maybe start this over?
internet connection is unstable. That's not. Are you hearing me now?
Now I can, yes.
Are you? Oh, you can hear me? Okay. All right. Where
You know what,
should I start
Rebecca?
from?
Actually, why don't you, start from the beginning of the slide. It might be helpful if you turn off your video. It might be, for yourself.
Okay. Yeah. hold
It
on.
might improve
stop
you.
it.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
good, go ahead.
Okay. So with applications, really overall, there's no consistent trends. So as you can see from these numbers, I was going through them in more detail, but I don't need to. You can see them in front of you. There's some schools that had minimal change. What one thing interesting to note was that the two that had positive change but minimally were both public institutions in Georgia. There was some change, so but significant but not outrageous change in application numbers. And then I guess one thing that's interesting is the ones that have the most for these two categories, or the most, I guess 3 and then 15, 2, 3, and 15 are public universities. And then most significant change was Duke, which I think is still a mystery to me. Debbie and I were a little shocked to see that such a drop in applications for Duke. And then Northeastern and BC had a lot more applications. And so that's something I'm going to kind of touch on in the next slide. But regardless of whether their application numbers for their early rounds went up or down, they all had significantly more, so over 20% more applications than pre-COVID numbers. So the exception is Duke, because for some reason they had a big drop, but they have so they actually have an overall decrease in early applications. Like I said, I still don't know why. When it comes to acceptances, there's really, once again, no consistent trend. So Duke actually still you can see there's some schools accepted fewer admits, and it varied on by how many fewer. Some had about the same number of admits as previous years, and some had more. So as you can see, Rice had 5% more admits, and that's in part because they expanded their freshman class. And then University of Virginia only started their early decision program a few years ago, so it's definitely becoming more popular, especially with all of the uncertainty. You have a lot of students, especially in-state students, who are, saying this is a really good school. I have an advantage by, because I'm an in-state student here, so I'm going to apply early decision. And then when we look at the results, acceptance rates more or less stayed the same for early action. So remember, early action is non-binding, so it kind of makes sense that it would stay the same. There's not a huge advantage to applying early action. So these are just some of the schools, but it wasn't more than a 2% change either way. And all but University of Georgia have lower acceptance rates than before COVID. And then acceptance rates for the most part trended down for early decision schools, but once again, it's kind of inconsistent and varied by how much. What was interesting to see was that Boston College and Northeastern had the most, and I was trying to figure out why. And Boston College's early decision rate went up it went from 37% before COVID up to 39%. So it actually increased last year. Maybe that was because, Boston's in, the same area as, a lot of other highly competitive schools. So if somebody's applying to one Boston school, they might be applying to others, especially if, if students applying to Harvard and MIT, maybe Boston College and Northeastern, both of these are Boston, might be a backup for those students. So maybe, so that could have explained some of the increase in their acceptance rates last year. As you can see, they were both pretty dramatic. And so then you can see why, because they went up, especially Northeastern went up a lot last year. It was also the introduction of their second early decision round. So they were able to get even more early decision applicants and really help with that uncertainty of yield by accepting a lot of them. And then this year, now that there's a little bit more certainty in terms of at least students are, the college will be most likely happening as normal because it's, for the most part, colleges are on campus this year, although now with Omicron, some are off campus again, but for the most part, we can expect in the fall that students will be on campus. So now those are going down a little bit. And since there was, since there was such an, and also because there was such an increase in applications, it makes sense that this year, they probably more students saw that they had such high acceptance rates last year, applied this year, and now there's so many more applicants, so acceptance rates go down. Penn actually increased their acceptance rate, their early decision acceptance rate by 1% this year. And once again, with Duke's early decision acceptance rate went up because they have less applicants than a significant amount less applicants than last year. So these are just the remaining early decision, early action announcement dates. So we still don't have all the data. And the reason why I don't have all the colleges here is because really there's not data. Like colleges are not always transparent about their data. If they are, we will present it to you. We like scour the internet for data. I'm like always looking for different types of data. And I synthesize the data for you in a way that will help you in terms of making decisions. Right now, unfortunately, we're going to have to see how the regular decision round is impacted by these early decision rounds, but because there haven't been consistent trends, it is a little hard to predict right now. But when I talk about the implications for the class of 2023, it's predictable unpredictability, really, but that's at the most highly selective colleges, right? So I was talking about most of the colleges out there you can get into, and it's still a little bit more predictable. The schools that we're talking about all have acceptance rates, overall acceptance rates under 20%. So if we're looking at schools even that have 30% acceptance rates, which is still selective college, still a very selective college, those schools are going to be more predictable than those really highly selective colleges. And students are applying, even though, I have students, I say probably about half my students, even though I've said, here's statistics showing that students with your similar academic profile have not gotten accepted in the past, they're still wanting to apply and hedge their bets and just try just to see. And by having all those applications.
That increased because of test optional, that like desire to just now kind of put in the application?
I think, yes, I think I always saw it, but it wasn't quite as drastic because, and also just there's that uncertainty, but I think it's just not as drastic. It wasn't as drastic before because there was that test score that kind of limited them, but now they could say, oh, well, we'll apply test optional. And so, just going back, and we'll talk about test optional in a second, but there's, so one thing we can see more of, and there was a lot of it last year, was more use of the wait list and also January and spring admits. I had a lot of students not a lot, but I had quite a few number of students say that them saying, we'll accept you if you come in January or the spring. And
maybe Rebecca, can you just explain kind of why colleges do that?
Yeah, so I mean, they do that. Well, waitlist they do because they, yield uncertainty. So they're not sure what the yield is going to be, especially with students applying to more and more colleges. If the student applies to, 15 colleges, they can only go to one. And so if they're accepted to 12 of them, they're only going to one. So a lot of colleges will have a wait list, and those wait lists have gotten bigger. And then based off of who decides to attend and where they still have gaps and what they need, they'll go to their wait list to fill those gaps in terms of like creating a diverse class. And then with the spring admits, this has been, a crazy time. And, a student might just, it might not work out financially. Their family might still be struggling for whatever reason. There's always melts at colleges, and melt means that students who start and then drop out or transfer or do whatever. So springs, a lot of colleges will do spring starts to kind of make up for that amount. So it's, one thing to keep in mind is that you might need to be flexible if you want to get into one of your, like I know Northeastern and Boston University offered my students last year spring admits, some of them. So that's something to be aware of at some of those more highly selective colleges. And then, but what's really most important is if you create a well-balanced list, which we can definitely help you do with likely and target options, then you won't have that unpredictability, because those likely and target options are going to be predictable. They're going, for the most part, going to be very predictable. And so you should still have a lot of options, and then just say, what are my, 2 or 3 dream schools that I want to apply to, and apply to those as well. But know that they're very unpredictable. They're predictably unpredictable.
So Rebecca, there's a question about, oops, sorry. Somebody saying, so if my student has like the 3.5 GPA, but has a 1580 SAT score, are they not going to benefit from having that good SAT score because
They absolutely will.
Yeah, they'll still benefit even though their GPA is on the lower side.
Yeah, so they will. This is a whole nother presentation, but colleges, I think what it'll do is they're gonna see that you have the aptitude to do well. It will definitely help, but they're gonna wanna understand why, and this is where you have to craft your narrative and talk to your counselor and write in your essay as to explain why your grades may not be as strong as your test scores indicate they should be. And so I would definitely submit your standardized test scores. So I definitely wouldn't go test optional in that case. You definitely want to submit test scores that, so you can see here, I have a table, and this is just like, it's nothing official by any means. It's just general guideline where, if your student has that kind of GPA, so over an A average, so A plus average, then, the ideal for the colleges that, those top tier colleges, you're looking at that 1450 and above test score, SAT score, or 33 and above ACT score. If you're an A minus to A student, then, generally anything above a 1300 is worth submitting, but it also depends on the college. So if you have lower than a 1300, then I would, and you're in that 3.5 to 4.0 range, I would recommend going test optional, because your test scores aren't going to help you by any means. And so that's where your grades are what are going to shine. And so that's just kind of what this part means. But test optional is going to continue, as you can see, even though colleges have gone back more towards normal, the new normal, I guess. Standard test optional practices are increasing at colleges. There are some colleges that have taken away test optional, but a lot of them are continuing with it. But you want to make sure that if you are going to apply test optional, it's really because it doesn't help you. And looking, really trying to kind of maybe study for those tests if you're capable of getting, if you're close to those ranges, those ideal SAT ranges. Maybe doing a little prep can definitely help you, because 2/3 of successful admits in 2020 to 21 submitted standardized test scores. That's 2/3 of ones that did submit standardized test scores were above the 50% range from the previous admission cycle. So one thing to keep in mind is that, and we're going to explain that a lot in subsequent workshops, but the data that is out there now in terms of test scores is from before COVID. So it's going to be interesting. The data over the next few years is going to be kind of a little hard to read, just because it was so impacted by COVID. But to keep in mind that if you see a mid 50% range of test scores from, whatever's published, unless it's a school saying this is what our numbers were last year, but in all of the guidebooks, on all of like the College Board and those types of websites, on, College Insights for Road to College, all of those SAT score data and ACT score data, the mid 50% ranges are from before COVID. And so likely because of test optional, only students with higher test scores are submitting. The mid 50% is actually in reality higher than the mid 50% that you're going to see on those websites. So I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, who's going to talk a little bit more about our program.
Sure. Wait, before I do that,
Questions.
yeah,
Usually I have a question slide and I do.
let me go through some of the questions. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about, there's a question about the GPAs that you were showing. Were they unweighted or weighted? And a little bit about, yeah, how colleges interpret the grades.
I mean, that's a whole workshop.
And that is a whole workship onto itself. I
Yeah.
know. So maybe just like, give like a few sentences towards
Yeah,
that.
I'd say this is generally unweighted. It's weighted, unweighted. It depends on how much your school weights. But I would say weighted, because over 4.0 generally is going to be weighted, unless your school gives 4.33 for AP or IB or whatever classes. And sorry, what was part 2 of the question?
Just about how the colleges recalculate
GPAs.
Yeah, when they get GPAs from all of these schools, how are they comparing them?
So one thing you'll see, I have a fabulous slide that shows where I believe GPAs are imaginary numbers, and it's because there's lots of different GPA scales and grading scales, and at every school I've worked at, an A has, like an honors A has had a different weighting. And so that's, they're kind of imaginary numbers. So a lot of the times colleges will convert it to an unweighted 4.0 scale. A lot of times they'll only look at your core academic subjects. And so, they'll look at it that way. And so they focus less so on the actual GPA number, and they focus more on 2 things: the rigor of curriculum. So how many the classes you're taking, that in how many core subjects you're taking, and if you're taking honors, AP, IB, advanced coursework. And then they're also looking at the actual grade that you got in the class. So they're looking at that more so than a GPA number, because the GPA number, like I said, is kind of imaginary, and you can sign up for Concierge Service to see my whole workshop on that.
But they are looking at grades like from 9th grade to 11th grade.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are looking at your grades, very much so. And that's going to tell them a lot more than just a 1 GPA number. They'll see the trend in your grades. They'll be able to see if you have an upward trend, if there's a certain subject that you struggle with. Is that subject what you want to study? If it's not, then it might not matter as much. They want to see that you're taking all the core subjects for at least 3, if not 4 years, and core subjects, English, math, science, social sciences, history, and then foreign language is the 5th one. And they want to see that you're taking all of those and doing well, and at least well enough in those classes, because you're going to most likely have to take them in college.
And what about people are also asking about dual enrollment classes, if they've taken that during high school? Like, where does that fit into what colleges are looking at and considering?
Yeah, colleges, I mean, absolutely, you can take dual enrollment classes, do look good. I'd say AP classes tend to be viewed a little bit higher than AP and IB tend to be viewed a little bit better than dual enrollment, but dual enrollment is certainly better than just taking a regular class. And oftentimes dual enrollment, especially if it's a class that's not offered at your school, like if you're taking it at the college, that's something where you're showing that your intellectual curiosity has taken you beyond your school's curriculum.
Okay. And then there's a question about, do you think that test optional affects merit scholarships?
Test optional, no. So if a college says that they're test optional, unless they very specifically say
you might need test scores for it.
But almost every college that I've seen that is test optional, they're committing to being test optional in all senses. And so they will evaluate you for merit scholarships just differently. But that you will still qualify for merit scholarships. It just won't be like a matrix like it was or it is for the standardized tests.
And another question about if you've taken the SAT, but the school that you're applying to is test optional. I'm just confirming, but I just want people know the College Board doesn't automatically send your test scores.
As long as you don't. So here's something I actually told my students today, because I had my first junior college counseling class today. And I said that, when they register for standardized tests, or when you're taking the test, you might be in the SAT or the ACT, and they'll say, you get 5 free score reports, fill out the schools now you want them sent to. Don't do it. While yes, it's nice to get something for free, and we're all about trying to save money here. You want to have as much control over your application as possible, and you don't know what your score is going to be. And so I always say, you have a lot more control than you think in this process. Ultimately, you don't have control over what the decision is, but you have control as to what they see, and you don't want them to see a score that you don't want looked at.
Okay, last question, and then we'll go to the other slides. Somebody's asking, and again, I know we do like a whole session on this, but somebody's asking about if you declare a major, in this case, if you declare being an English major, does it help explain away why that student might have lower math grades?
Yeah, I'd say, I would say that don't just say you want to major in English because you have low math grades. If you haven't demonstrated that you have, I have a student who's applying for creative writing programs, and the girl has submitted to countless writing competitions and published many different pieces of work and reads like crazy. And, so I think she said she spends like 1 to 3 hours a day writing. Like, she clearly is very interested in being an English creative writing major. If you aren't doing things that are showing your interest in English and or writing, reading or writing, literature, things like that, then don't just say you want to be an English major to explain away a math program. That being said, if you're genuinely more of an English or humanities student and they're seeing that within your application and your math grades are a little lower, then yeah, that could explain your lower math grades. That's just not your strength. That being said, at those most highly selective colleges, they have more than enough applicants that have top grades in all the subjects. So just something to be aware of.
Okay, so Rebecca, if you can just go to those last few slides. Hopefully you guys got some value out of tonight. We, at Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group, do a lot of sessions in general for the community. But we also have a service called Concierge, which we do these types of sessions on a regular basis, several a month, and to go in a little deeper than we might normally do in answering questions in the general Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And people like Rebecca, lead them on a regular basis. Rebecca definitely is there once a month with types of presentations like we went through today. We have another counselor in residence, Ellen Whalen, who does similar types of presentations. And we have 2 college financial advisors who kind of take the financial side of talking about your EFC and financial aid and merit scholarships and how you plan out your 529s. And so we're really trying to help on both the pure academic side, but also tying in the financial side of planning for paying for college. So this is a great time to consider if you want to join. We are just bringing in families with the class of 2023. There was a group of families of 2023s who joined in December, but we are officially starting to work with and focus on topics related to juniors starting January 20th. And just as a little preview, the first topic that we're going to do, and actually Rebecca and I haven't done this. We've talked about it a lot. We've written articles about it, but we haven't done this, the presentation that we're going to do, or the topic we're going to do on January 20th, which is actually going to be a 2-part session. And we're going to dissect the common data set. So if you guys don't even know what that means, you don't even know what the common data set is, and I wouldn't expect that you would. It is the plethora. It's the king of data king queen of data in college admissions.
It's where all the data that you see on all of the websites out there comes from.
Right. And what you see on websites is just the, a top level of what's in the common data set. So that's going to be the first 2 sessions of really digging in, explaining what the common data set is. It is perfect if you're kind of at the start of this process to understand what the common data set is, and then understand how to use that information, because there's a lot there that people don't even realize. So that's, again, just a taste of the types of sessions that we do. And we have a private Facebook group where there's a lot of, daily discussions going on there. If people have questions that kind of pop up out of the blue, which happens all the time in this process as things change, you can ask questions there and get answers. So this is just a service to, some people honestly use it, I guess I would say, almost like an insurance policy to know that they always have a resource to go to, that they can get, good vetted, professional answers from, and that they also know that somebody's going to guide them about what they need to be focusing on each month of the year. So we actually normally don't offer discounts, but right now, because it's the beginning of the year, and if you're wanting to kind of make sure you're in for the whole process, we're discounting if you pay in full, a 25% discount, and that would cover you from January to when your student graduates at the end of May. Hard to imagine, it seems so far away. End of May in 2023. Oh, I wrote that wrong. It should be ends in May
2023.
2023. Oh my God, I just realized that all these numbers are swirling. So that is incorrect. So it goes from now for 15 months till the end of May 2023. So we're going to have this special going until Sunday. And if you are interested in signing on, because we're starting, next Thursday. And so just to summarize what this concierge program is, it's these types of monthly coaching sessions, several a month. You get access to, which I should maybe show really, really quickly. I'll just show you what it looks like.
Here, do you want me to open
yeah.
it?
Yeah. Oh, I got it right here if you
Okay.
want to switch.
All right. There was just one more slide. Was there? Oh, the special. Oh.
Okay. Yeah, so so part of concierge, and a lot of reason why people join, besides listening to us and all the information we can share, is because you get free access to, and I'm going to switch for 1 second, Rebecca, to the tool that we developed called College Insights. And that we actually do a whole session on College Insights and how to use it, and how this really helps in the college search process. But this is just it comes along with being part of a concierge member, and it's a great searching tool. It has a lot of information, and some of the things that I particularly like are we have crowdsourced information. So if you can see here, these are actual offers of students from last year, and we're starting to get in this year's offers. You can see 2022, 2023, and these are been anonymously crowdsourced. So you can see what a student, and you can see their stats, you can see what money that they were offered, you can see what their EFC is. So it kind of gives you an idea of what, if your student is similar, that they might get a similar offer. Plus people were asking about deadlines. That's one of the information that's easy here. So you can quickly see who has early decision deadlines, who has early action deadlines, who has the early decision 2 deadlines, regular decision. And you can kind of use all this information to zero in on, the schools that are going to be best for your students, because they might, because academically, geographically, fit wise, but also that are colleges that can potentially give you the most money to make the, quite honestly, the cost of attendance as affordable as possible. So that actually comes along with College Insights, comes with being a member of Concierge. And then Rebecca, I'm going to switch back.
Oh, okay.
And then the last thing is we have.
But Sorry,
Yeah.
Debbie, just to interrupt. I saw somebody ask if one-on-one services are included. So they're not included, but there are discounts on the a la carte services. And so
Yeah.
everything that I do with my students, we offer as a service, really, and so I'll have I have people just do one-on-one, like an hour or two consultation with me. I review their file and, give my advice, things like that. But then I've also worked with students, all the way through. I mean, we just had a student, it was a transfer student, get into Columbia. So that was exciting. Or not Columbia, Cornell. So she's going to Cornell. So that was one that we
So, that's the other beauty is you can kind of, you can get as much help as you want and you can do it on your own as much as you want. So we're kind of, the service is here to guide you and to answer questions. But if you find that you've hit a roadblock, you can, get an hour of, one-on-one with Rebecca or Ellen or Luann, if it relates to finances. So,
and just to say that student that we did that got into Cornell, I think it was, we had like an hour consultation where she asked me lots of questions about, strategy and what she should do. And then she was really good with essays, a very strong writer, but I went back and forth with her on multiple drafts of her essays. So she purchased 5 hours, but she was also a really top writer. So, you could purchase a certain amount of hours. I'll let you know approximately how much I think it would be. So we do offer that as well.
Right. And then even when it comes to the actual essay, again, you could work with like Rebecca, you could, we give guidance on how to write the essay that you don't need to work with anybody. But if you want, additional help, it could be, one-on-one with Rebecca. We also partner with a company called Prompt, and they give special pricing to concierge members. So there's lots of different ways that we can help, support you and your student at different phases. And, it's kind of as much as you need, but also support in helping you do as much as you can on your own.
Yeah. Another popular service is reviewing college lists. So
yes,
helping make recommendations on schools that would be good fits.
Yeah, I would say our 3 most popular kind of additional add-ons that people did was exactly what Rebecca said, is that they kind of did a lot of work on their lists, on their college lists, again, kind of based on the sessions that we did in the concierge service. And then it would be like a check-in, and we would review their college lists, make suggestions, or say, if something we didn't think was right. So that was kind of, again, like a great way to combine doing as much as you can on your own and then getting expert advice to make sure, or an expert set of eyes to make sure that you're doing it the right way and adding in additional suggestions. The other big service that people took was a common app review. That's later on in the process. That was really more like in August through October, where they and their student, completed the common app, and then they wanted somebody to, have an extra set of eyes to make sure that, they didn't miss anything. And the third were, if people wanted extra help on essays. Those tend to be the 3 major areas that people want additional help in. And actually, I'm seeing now that we're kind of in a different phase, is that as we're getting close, people sometimes also need help in just kind of their finances and pulling it all together, and having a financial professional kind of say or review what they think that they can afford, or how they can rearrange what monies they have to pay for college, and then figure out if they need to take loans, where the best places to take loans. So, and then the last page is, we did a webinar last year with Jeff Solingo, and we still have some books. So we were going to use them for people who sign up. Again, by the 16th, you would get a free copy of the book, which is just, again, if you're starting this process, it is a great resource to really, and plus, quite honestly, it's pretty enjoyable book to read. It's not dry, it's kind of engaging. So, so you get a free copy of the book, and you would get access to the webinar series we did last year with Jeff. So go to concierge.roadtocollege.com, and the special pricing will be there until Sunday, because again, we're starting next Thursday, the 20th. So let me see what other questions. How much is it only for college insights, a fair question. So if you just wanted to do College Insights, it's $24.99 a month. So some people use it for a few months. They take a break because they're doing other research, and then they come back when it gets closer to finalizing their college list. So again, that's something you can you can use it, stop, and come back and use it again. Oh, good question. I don't know, Rebecca, what your thoughts are. Is the sophomore year of high school too early to start this program? I'll tell you my opinion, and then Rebecca can give you her opinion. You know what? I think it's amazing if you want to start in sophomore year. And I'm not saying that only because, we'd love to have you, but the people who start early, and I've noticed this every year we do this program, they go through the process so much more relaxed. I don't want to say you're going to always be completely relaxed, because there's a lot of ups and downs, but there's just a more smoothness to their process, because they learn what's important early on. They have time to adjust. That's really the most important thing. They have time to adjust, whether it's adjusting your finances because you've learned stuff and you have the chance to make changes, whether your student realizes what's important that they want to focus on, whether they have time to really prep for taking tests, if that's the direction that they want to go in, whether they have time because they've understood the essay and the application process, so they're not doing it at the last minute. So starting this process in sophomore year, when I say starting, I really kind of view it as the parents learning the process, not kind of, making your child crazy in sophomore year. It really gives you the time to make adjustments and kind of somewhat enjoy it as best you can with your students.
Yeah, so I would say there's pros and cons. So the pro is absolutely that you're going to know what you need to know before you even start. And so I feel like we try to give you everything in as timely a manner as possible, and try to coordinate it with when ideally things should be done throughout the year to get a head start on things. But still, there's always things, especially with students who procrastinate, that can always be done earlier. So I think the pro to doing it, doing this program as with a sophomore student, is that you're going to know everything you need to know before you go into the process. And there's certain things that, I had a workshop with my 9th graders today, and I gave them a workshop on summer programs and, summer plans, what they should do for the summer, because, now that we're back in the winter, start thinking about what you're going to do in the summer that's going to benefit you for college. And so, I've told a lot of things. So there's a lot of things I would love for students to know earlier on. And so you will kind of learn those lessons earlier. That being said, the cons are that you're not getting the advice and hearing things as you're doing them. And I think there definitely is benefit to having that support of other people who are going through it at the same time as you, and also just kind of checking yourself against what you should be doing. So it could go either way. I think if you take really detailed, copious notes on everything, and then it could be a really good idea. You just won't have that kind of learn by doing to go along with it.
And then there's another good question, about when should your list be finalized?
So what I do with my students is I've asked them now for a list I have them fill out a form. And there is a service we've provided where we actually curate a list for you. And so we have you fill out an interest form of what you're interested in. And I do that with my students. And then I put together a list of approximately 30 colleges for them to kind of narrow down what they should be looking at. But then ultimately I say, you kind of narrow that down throughout the spring and summer of your junior year. And really you want to come into senior year with a finalized list. So you can use the summer certainly. But one thing that's helpful is if there's a college that so if you can finalize your list by the end of junior year, a benefit is that you can spend the summer working on some additional essays that don't tend to change from year to year. So that is a benefit. If you want tips on what students can do in the summer, we will have a workshop on that. Yes. It's a whole workshop, so I can't give away everything for free right now. Nor do I have the time. I haven't had dinner yet. I'm East
So-
Coast time.
Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to, message me at debbie@rhodecollege.com, send a message on Facebook. But hopefully you got value out of tonight, and, you'll join us in the concierge service so we could help you as a family and you as a student even more throughout the year. And got to tell you, it's kind of fun. We get to know people better, obviously, than just through Facebook. And it's really nice to kind of follow people's journeys. It's great. Now, we actually had a session the other night and really hearing people's stories about, because, for the class of 2022, we're starting to hear the results of what's happening, and it's really satisfying. It's satisfying. You feel happy for the other families in that you're doing this journey with, and we feel happy to see people get the results that they want. And again, there are ups and downs, but I haven't seen a family yet that doesn't end up happy at the end, and they probably are ending up someplace where they could not have predicted, but they're still very happy, and that's kind of the journey of this process.
Great.
Okay, so one last good question. How many families are in the cohort? It completely ranges. I mean, we've honestly had between 60 and 90, and we have never had a problem, not servicing and helping everybody who's in there. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks to
Thank
everybody
you.
for joining. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.